consider specifically this BLS issue and the contention from the president. Well, I do have a question for you, sir. It is related to this.
You hit Mark Warner with exactly the right question.
Well, I'd like to ask it of you as well. We either assume that the data is manipulated, in which case I'm curious as to whether you personally have seen evidence of it. But if it is manipulated and actually we have a stronger labor market than the data suggests, why would the Fed need to cut interest rates?
Well, when you ask Mark Warner that question, what he should have said, hell yes, the Fed should have cut rates 3 months ago if we had known that that was the data and if he believes it was the data.
Do you?
I mean, you can't have it both ways. Here's what I know. That was the biggest miss in 50 years. The biggest miss. Now, it's either incompetence or partisanship. What I can tell you, Kailey, is that the BLS and the BEA have a history of political interference with their data. If you go back, there's the famous quick pay scan audit, if you remember that one in 2015, when Obama was able to move data from Q4 back to Q3, and it helped him for his election. And then in 2018, we found out that they had basically suppressed numbers on Q4 growth in 2018, basically to make us look bad on what we were doing with respect to the tax cut. So here's the thing. There's two possibilities here. Let me just say this. Since the pandemic, we've been getting the numbers spectacularly wrong. I mean, the variance in the numbers dramatically increased after COVID. So we either got incompetence or we got partisanship. And either way, it was absolutely appropriate for President Trump to clean house at the BLS. We need people to give us numbers. And the reason why it matters is if we don't get the right numbers, then we're not going to make the right decisions, particularly at the Fed. So
you've
that's
seen
what
evidence that
today.
These numbers are not right. Where is that evidence coming from?
Well, let's say they're right. Okay, let's go with that first. Okay, that's the biggest miss in 50 years. Okay, so that's incompetence. How do you miss that badly? And if they miss that badly, the implications of this are this. Suppose those numbers were right and we had known them accurately 3 months ago. Interest rates would probably be 100 basis points lower, not just 50. Okay? So there's an interaction between that data and the Fed's decision. And Warner, I mean, look, these guys do their talking points. Instead of answering your question honestly, he just shifted and supported Powell in terms of not lowering interest rates because of tariffs, when in fact, Mr. Warner, debate you anytime, sir, there's no evidence of any inflation from the tariffs. So we're in a situation now where we just need good numbers. We're not getting them. So what's wrong with firing the person who made the biggest miss in 50 years? And for the last 8 years, we've had evidence of partisanship and evidence of incompetence.
Well, to stick with the you can't have both file just for a minute, to get back to Kailey's original question, if the job market is in fact much stronger than the data are reflecting, then why would be cutting interest rates at this point? Wouldn't that inflame inflation on its own?
Okay, let's have that's the perfect question. Okay, because let's say the number had come in at estimate today, we would still be in a world where interest rates should be 50 to 100 basis points lower for a number of reasons. First, trend of inflation is down. Second of all, the differential between U.S. interest rates is significantly bigger than the rest of the world, and that creates all sorts of problems in terms of arbitrage and things like that. And there's no evidence of the tariff inflation that Powell is claiming is holding him back. He says, well, if it weren't for tariff uncertainty, I'd lower them. Well, there's no tariff uncertainty in the data. So even if, again, two cases here. One case, the numbers are right, the revisions are right. It was a horrible miss. They're incompetent. Fire them. And the Fed should have lowered interest rates by 100 basis points by now. Or the numbers are wrong and we would have hit estimate. And even in that case, we still lower interest rates by at least 50 basis points. So, I mean, the Trump economy is doing beautifully. So let's not, I mean, this is Bloomberg, right? what investors, okay, we got like 500 down on the Dow today, but it's like fine. I was like on April 2nd, we got below 40,000 on the Dow. I said, hey, it's going to 50,000, no worry. And sure enough, it came back sharply. We're in a very good place. We're in a very good place right now. But we need better data. That's the takeaway from today.
Well,
that
and
was
he's made the point
miss.
on the gap between expectations that Wall Street economists might have had and the actual data we got. But can we not attribute that gap to the very uncertainty you were just referencing? Maybe you're not seeing it necessarily in inflation, but how do we know it's not filtering into hiring and firing decisions that businesses are making?
I think there's, again, a great question, Kailey. I think what we've learned is there was data before the pandemic, data during and after the pandemic. And the variability of the data since the pandemic days has been much higher than before for two reasons. One is during the pandemic, we had a bunch of phantom companies, a lot of fake going on, and it's like really distortion. But the other thing that was happening is the tremendous influx of millions and millions of illegal aliens, which were creating this disconnect between the two kinds of surveys that all these numbers are based on. And the beautiful thing about those numbers, I don't know if you saw this, but on net, we've had 1.8 million jobs created for American citizens, and we've lost 1.3 million jobs for illegal aliens. So this is an important implication as you go forward. We've gotten used to needing 190,000 jobs a month in order to keep the unemployment rate at whatever it is. Once you get the illegal alien deportations going, that steady state will be dropping to 100,000 a month. So you're going to be sitting on the set here and you say, well, it's only 100,000. And it's no, that's all we need when you get rid of the illegal aliens taking Americans' jobs. And by the way, when that happens, you'll see the real wages grow up. So these are great questions you're asking, Kailey. This is but we've got to cut through this. We've got to get good data. And we're not getting that.
I want to ask you about the downward revisions, if we stick with the BLS story for a moment, because the president's Truth Social post said that the BLS revised the jobs total down by over 800,000, quote, right after the election, unquote. This gets to the political motivation that he's suggesting. But BLS revised those numbers on August 21st of 2024. We were in Chicago at the Democratic Convention that week. So what's he talking about with the timeline?
What the president is legitimately concerned about is a pattern going back to Obama 2015 all the way through the Biden years and his term where the BLS and BEA appeared to be playing politics at times. They gave you 3 examples. And I think there's an issue of trust here. Do you trust the numbers? I don't trust the numbers. I haven't trusted them for a long time. So what's wrong with firing the person who's in charge of the production of the numbers when they've been getting it wrong month after month after month? And then, I mean, it's like,
so in January
capitulation here, the biggest miss in 50 years.
Well, January 2024, Biden is president, seeking re-election at this point. We got a downward revision of 234,000. You wouldn't have believed that figure either then.
We don't. Do you trust them, Kailey? Do you trust the BLS at this point?
That's not a question for me, sir. I'm not being interviewed here.
Correct. So I think your investors don't trust it. I don't trust it. Nobody trusts it out there. And what are we talking about here? I think what we're talking about is getting integrity. What I told you earlier, Kailey, is a lot of the problem came from 2 things: how illegal immigration distorts the numbers, and how the pandemic programs basically led to massive distortions. And for some reason, we haven't been able to get back to the accuracy we had prior to that. But even before the pandemic, there were documented cases. The quick pay thing I mentioned with Obama, the Q4 incident in 2018, where those were clearly political manipulation of the data. So we got to get away from that. And we need better numbers so that the Fed can make better decisions, because they're making horrible decisions right now.
We don't have evidence to support those instances here at Bloomberg, Peter,
which
but
one?
I'm glad.
The quick pay?
That
one's pretty well documented. I mean, I would just ask you to go back and look at what happened there, and then in
to the extent that you have evidence here, come back and talk
that?
to us about it. To the extent that you have evidence of this being rigged, we want to hear about it.
I would just put it on the table.
Well, I appreciate your coming in to talk to us, as always, Peter. Peter Navarro is, of course, White House Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing Policy. Thank you, as always, for coming over from the White House